hundreds of thousands, or even more. But it depends what is the energy behind that business. Because some people start a business to use other people, not to take care of them. They use them to make money and accumulate power for themselves. Those businesses cause a lot of suffering. But if you have a business which is primarily about caring for people, meeting their real needs, then it actually causes healing. And we can talk about that a little more as we go forward.
Yes.
But I think the other realization that we're having as we have the economic crisis, the health crisis, this is really, the world is like we have had a collective heart attack and we are in the intensive care unit. What we need to come out of it is intensive level of caring, right? And that's, I think, where what we're finding interestingly is if you look at which countries have done well in managing this crisis and coming out of it faster, they are mostly led by women. Right, so you have countries like Iceland and New Zealand and Taiwan and Finland and Germany and several others, 9 countries, I think, all led by women. So there's a great illustration. And then you have other countries that are doing poorly that are led by people that exhibit sort of the classic, hyper masculine type energy.
Mhm.
And we can think about who those leaders are and which those countries are, right? But this is really showing that leadership needs to evolve in that way. And what I think we're finding right now is generally there's a crisis or a vacuum of leadership. We have a few leaders who are showing up, but many leaders who are not showing up in
Yes.
the right way. So I think it's calling for us to re-examine. And of course, then the other thing that's happening is in the US, we have this whole social crisis that is happening as well because of the racial history of this country. And, unlike South Africa, which when they ended apartheid, they went through a truth and reconciliation process where they were able to heal faster because they got people to acknowledge the truth, face up to the truth of what happened and acknowledge their part in it, and then commit to working together to bring more healing. The United States never did that. We had slavery for 250 years, and then we had another, sort of segregation or apartheid for another 100 years, and then we've had 50 years still of deep racial injustice after that, 401 years now. And it still hasn't healed. And this is actually bringing that to the surface, and it has touched people in a deep way. And I believe that there will be fundamental healing that will happen in this society because of that. And that healing can spread. Diseases are contagious, but I think healing can also be contagious.
Yes,
We can
of
spread
course.
healing from this into other sectors. Many, many things need healing in our world.
So, what I understood after this moment, do you think the organization will be more resilient? We will work together for society and planet? Will you operate as a system of cooperate based on balance of fundamental human motivation, self-interest, and care for others? Do you think we can get there?
I do think we can get there. I think, coming out of this pandemic and coming out of the deep economic recession that we are going through, the companies that handle this well, the companies that showed up with caring and compassion will be rewarded.
Yes.
Companies that did not do that, people will remember that they didn't show up in this time. And therefore, in the future, there will be more conscious companies or operating more companies operating in a conscious way, I believe. The second thing that this has also shown us is that many companies do not have any resilience. In other words, they have very weak balance sheets. Right now, you're getting into the investing world. Now, if you look at what's happened in the last 15 years in the US, where generally we've had since 2008, 12 years of growth, and the stock market and everywhere else, and profits have been high, and many companies have made a lot of money in that time. But what have they done with that money? They have not built up their balance sheets. What they've actually done is bought back their own shares. So you look at the airlines. The airlines were highly profitable in the last decade, but what they borrowed money, they used their profits to buy back their own shares, which only enriches the today's shareholder and the executives of the companies. actually it does not create any extra value, but the share price goes up even though you haven't created value because you've reduced the number of shares. It really disproportionately benefits people with stock options. Right? It seems like a blatant abuse of an economic of interest for people to do. They have something like trillions of dollars have been spent doing that. But as a result, the balance sheets are very weak. They have massive debt, right? And interest rates are low, therefore they were able to take on this. But now, as soon as the revenue came down, like the airlines, American, United, and Delta, the big three airlines here, all were facing bankruptcy within weeks because it's only the that say them. They have a lot of cash.
Raj.
Yeah.
We have a problem here. Connecting. Just a second, please.
Yeah.
I don't know if just for me, but let me see. Okay. Just a few minutes, guys. Let me check. Okay. Because the transmission is not good.
Is it my sound?
Yeah.
It's my sound?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a second. Maybe your mic here, it's too close. Yeah.
Okay, I can
yes,
change
it's too
that. Why don't I?
Yes, too close to your.
Let me try this other.
Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you to, unfortunately, to say what was you saying. You repeat.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to ask you that.
Okay.
Right?
How does it sound now?
Much better. Thank you.
Oh, really? Okay. 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 So what would you like me to repeat? Everything from the beginning or just the last?
The last.
The last part.
So just a few minutes. I'm sorry for that.
Sure, no problem. No, I think we were talking about coming out of this economic and medical crisis, societal crisis. Will companies become more resilient, right? And I think they will have to, because one of the lessons that we're learning is that companies were not paying attention to their own financial health, which is ironic. They were profitable and their share price was doing well, but the company itself was getting weaker. Why? Because they were buying back their own shares and accumulating debt. And so they were highly leveraged, a lot of these companies, which means that if there's a downturn, they cannot survive it without a bailout. They can quickly go into bankruptcy. They don't have reserves and they have high levels of debt. And the reason for that was massive levels of share buyback, which was basically rewarding today's shareholders and today's executives while making the company weaker in the long term. Why? Because most of those leaders have a short-term time horizon. They just said, I want to make as much money before I retire as CEO. But meanwhile, you have weakened that company. So I think going forward, there will be a greater emphasis on looking at the balance sheet, making sure, being a conscious business means being responsible to make sure that every stakeholder has a future in your company. And if the company is so weak that it will die in the next recession, there will be more pandemics in the future. They could be even more deadly than this one, right? We have climate change to deal with. We have a lot of things to deal with in the world going forward. And companies need to have fundamental strength to be able to deal with those crises and to get through those downturns without collapsing. So I think there will be a greater scrutiny on that front, and it's possible that share buybacks might even be made illegal, especially in the United States.
It's depend of the level of consciousness, right? Because the company can choose to operate in fear or love or survive or state fear states. So do you think for example, in the United States and countries in first world and third world for us, Brazilian, what's the trends we follow, for example? I see many companies choose in fear states. So fire a lot of people, cut a lot of benefits. So when the fear literally is the way of thinking, it's time. I think is now. We are living a hard time, obviously, but it's I see as an opportunity to change a lot of things, especially if you can choose how can I see the situation through love or fear. Do you
Yeah.
think, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that is the great challenge that we face right now, because it is such a severe crisis,
Yeah,
economic crisis. For many companies, it's a matter of survival. And in some case, many companies are trying to avoid laying off people, right? They're doing furloughs, which means you still have your job, but right now we can't pay you, you come back later. Fortunately, in some countries like the US, the government is able to step in and provide unemployment and other benefits to people so that they can manage economically, even though they don't have a job right now. But in many countries, even that is not an option. In India, there's no such safety net. I imagine in Brazil, there's not much of a safety net. So, if it's a matter of survival, I mean, some companies will not be able to do that, but companies that are able to do that have to think about this as a family. How does a family get through a challenging time?
yes,
Right? With a sense of shared sacrifice. You don't let some people go so other people can prosper. You figure out, how do we do this together? So I think it has to be the last option when it's only a matter of survival, that we have to have massive layoffs, etc. Right? Otherwise, I think we have to try to operate, as you said, from that place of love and caring. And even, like, I have a friend, Danny Meyer, who runs a bunch of restaurants in New York, some of the best restaurants in New York, and also Shake Shack. Now, Shake Shack is able to operate, but the fancy restaurants in New York are not able to operate. So he had to literally let go 95% of his people at those restaurants, right?
yeah,
But he said, we were the best employer in the past, right? When the world was normal. And he said, now that we're going through this crisis, I want to become the best unemployer. In other words, how can I do this in the most loving way possible? How can we help people make a transition? How can we guide them towards assistance that might be available? How can we make sure that when we do come back, right, that we have opportunities, for these people? How can we help them find other, because there are sectors in the economy where jobs are growing, jobs are increasing, whether it's here in delivery or various kinds of things. So they're providing all of that. They're doing it again with a sense of love, even though they're not able to keep those jobs. But it's the energy behind it, and the employees understand. If you have a restaurant and zero revenues are coming in, how are you going to pay anybody?
yeah,
Restaurants depend upon that. But it's a question of how you treat them, right? Because in the long run, this thing will end at some point, right? And then people will remember how you handle this. I think, as they say, tough times reveal the true character of people. It's easy to talk about being a loving business when everything is going well,
yes,
but the true test is when times are tough. How do you show up with a sense of shared sacrifice and a determination to try and get through this together to the extent humanly possible? And when it is not possible, how do we do that in the most humane way possible, where we do have to let people go, but then we try to think about how that will change in the future.
so just a second, there is. So the healing organization came the right time, right? Your book. So
Yeah.
could you tell us more about your new books?
Yeah. So the book came out in September of last year, 2019. Of course, at that time, we didn't have the same sense of urgency about this. But as we write about in the book, the suffering was already very high in the world. Even at a time of economic boom in the US, stock market was at record highs. Back then, unemployment was below 4%. So it looked like the economy was booming here. And yet, if you looked at the real picture, what we found is there was tremendous amount of suffering. That 50% of Americans have less than $400 in the bank. This is again before this crisis. And if they needed $2,000 within 30 days, would not be able to come up with it. So if they had a small problem like your car breaks down or your heating system or your child gets sick and you don't have medical insurance, suddenly that small problem becomes a life-changing crisis. And you're living with that fear all the time that, oh my God, I could lose my apartment, I could lose my house, I could lose all my savings, etc. based upon that. So there was tremendous financial distress, again, in a rich country like this, right? And if you look at the data for the last 40 years, it shows that worker pay was basically flat, had not gone up in 40 years in this country, while executive pay went up 1,000%. So what we realized, capitalism, American capitalism wasn't working for Americans, right? Forget about other people. That's why we had all this people that are now interested, young people, in socialism. We know that is not the answer, but it just shows the frustration. But then we see, in addition to that, that heart attacks were 20% higher on Mondays, right? Literally, our work is killing us. About 120,000 Americans die every year due to the stress connected to work. 600,000 Chinese die every year from too much work, overwork. So our work is causing tremendous suffering. If you look at depression, anxiety, drug addiction, and suicide, all of these things are up 20-30%, in the last 15 years or so. So there's a lot of silent suffering. There's a lot of psychological or psychic suffering going on. And of course, there's a lot of planetary suffering, right? We know about the large mammals, 90% are gone in the last century. Large fish, 95% are gone. 70% of the forest, 30% of the usable land. All kinds of things have been happening. We're living through a species extinction, a mass extinction of species. We have climate change. We have all kinds of pollution kills 9 million people every year. More than wars and terrorists and murderers, all those, 15 times more than all of those things put together. And that's because of the way we do business. So the first part of our book talks about the suffering that we have caused. Nobody goes into business with a desire to cause suffering. But because they are not conscious about what they're doing and the impact it is having, they do end up causing a lot of suffering. So we say, unless you choose to be part of the healing, you will be part of the suffering. You will cause suffering in the world, right? And we talk about why that is. Why has that happened, that business has become a place of suffering? And a big part of it really has to do with what you and I know very well, which is the masculine-feminine energy issue.
Yes.
That business, more than most societal institutions, have been run by men on masculine values, which have become hyper-masculine, right? So strength, courage, focus, resilience, which are positive masculine values. Because there was no feminine, they became domination, aggression, hyper-competition, winning at all costs. Everything becomes a war, right? Business is fought almost like a war, right? And it's about empire building. In the old days, we used to have Alexander the Great, and we used to have all of those. They would build their empires by engaging in one war after another and destroying and killing and taking over larger and larger amounts of land. Ultimately, they would die and everything would fall apart again, right? It was only to feed their own ego. And honestly, I see that in the world of business. Today, the empires are built by businesses. But I even look at 3G Capital out of Brazil as an example of empire building energy. They acquired all these companies, often in hostile takeovers, whether it's Heinz or Kraft or many others, and they tried to buy Unilever. And all they do is they lay off massive numbers of people, right? They put tremendous pressure to grow and to cut costs at the same time on all the existing managers. Life becomes very hard, and very grim when they come there. And for a while, things look like they're going well and the stock price goes up and profits go up, but then everything starts to fall because you can only put so much pressure on people. right? You can only make people run faster for a certain amount of time. Then people collapse. And that's what happens when you're operating from fear. You get a
Yeah.
rush, you can run fast, right, to save yourself from a bear or a lion, but then you can't sustain that, right? So I think that's what we've had in the world of business and in politics, really, in the world generally, excessive masculine energy. The world of business, we talk about the father of capitalism is Adam Smith, and he wrote about the wealth of nations, that people pursuing their own self-interest will end up meeting everybody's needs. But it's about self-interest, right? Which was more the father energy. But I wrote that he also wrote a book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments about the human need to care.
Yes, I
Right?
read. I read. I'm reading actually this book.
Moral sentiments.
I didn't
So
know. Yes.
yeah, and that's about the human need to care. So the way I say it is
Yeah.
that capitalism had a mother and a father.
Yeah.
And they were both
Yeah.
Adam
It's
Smith,
great.
right? Adam
Yeah.
Smith was mother and the father, but we
Yeah.
ignored the mother,
Yeah.
as we do in life, right?
Yeah.
It's funny that, this person who was killed by the police here in the US, George Floyd, as he was dying, he was calling out for his mother.
In the conscious business universe, we use the words impact and change a lot,
Hmm.
but we don't hear the word healing as often. Can you tell us a
Yeah.
little about what you mean by word healing, and if there is a difference between a conscious company and a healing organization?
Mm. Yeah. So by healing, what I mean is reduce suffering in the world,
So
bring more joy.
that's why you say a lot. I read many times. You say that business shouldn't just be about doing no harm. That's why you say that.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
So we want to reduce suffering and increase joy. There can be joy through work. See, if you love what you do and you love the people you work with and you love the people you serve, right? And you have a sense of meaning and purpose and respect and dignity, work becomes a source of joy and fulfillment, right? So we can reduce suffering and bring more joy and promote healthy growth. See, the world of business is obsessed with growth. And it's always about growing the revenue and growing the share price and growing. They're constantly looking to grow. But I say you have to ask, why should we grow and what kind of growth is healthy, right? If we have a business that is causing more stress, that is damaging the environment, damaging the community, damaging all these things, when they grow, the world gets worse. Life gets worse. Okay, that growth is like a cancer. We don't need cancer. Cancer is a kind of growth in our body, right? We don't want that. So we want healthy growth, which is people are becoming more capable, people are becoming more conscious, more caring, more creative, right? We're able to dream and do bigger things. We want that kind of growth, make people's lives better, have a positive impact. So that's what I mean by healing: is how can we reduce suffering and elevate joy and promote healthy growth. And in the middle part of the book, we have 25 examples or stories of companies that are doing that. Right? Not only are they not causing suffering, they're actually healing the suffering that already exists. Because, life is hard enough. Life is difficult. And our work makes it more worse. Because, we have problems at home. We might have a parent who's sick. We might have a child who has various challenges. We might have financial problems. And then we go to work and we have an abusive leader or manager, right? We have work that is physically dangerous and extremely hard and causes damage to our body, and causes stress to us, etc. We end up dying younger, right? And then we come home at the end of the day, because we are treated so poorly at work, we end up impacting our children and our families and our communities. So the way we operate our businesses impacts the way people live. It impacts their many generations, their children, their children's children, all of them are impacted. And if we just change the way we think about the business and we start to think of it as a place of healing, reducing suffering, elevating joy, then that has a positive impact in all those ways. And that's really what we try to show in the middle part of the book, that there are so many examples of how companies are able to do this.
Yeah.
And of course, as always, when you do the right things, the ethical, the moral, the caring, kind, compassionate things, it is always good for business too. People are more engaged, they're more productive, they're more creative, customers are more loyal. The business performance goes up. This is how I got into this whole world, because I wrote a book, Forms of Endearment, in 2007. And I showed that companies that operate like this, they care for everybody, they're loved by everybody, they pay their employees better, they invest in the community and the environment, everything. They actually outperform the market dramatically by 9-1 over 10 years, right? Their stock price went up dramatically. So it's not a trade-off. You don't have to
Yes.
hurt people to make money. We don't have to kill people to make money. In fact, the opposite. We can elevate people's lives and make them happier and more fulfilled, and the business will also prosper at the same time. That is how we have to do it. It is unacceptable that we are hurting people in order to make money. That is just, once we know there's a better way, there is a different way, and it all is a matter of consciousness and how we think about it.
Yes, let's talk about the leadership, right? Because the leader is so crucial here in this matter, right?
Yes.
Because business transformation is on the way. We have been talking about this for years, but now it is happening, right? Behind every tough situation, there is an opportunity. This is my opinion. But more than ever, it's time to do business, to build a better world for the next generation. That's what we said. So what is the most important role of the leadership in these days, Raj?
Yeah, so it's really ultimately, as we know, the consciousness of the leader. It puts an upper limit on the consciousness of the organization. So if the leader is operating with a low level of consciousness, which is only about money, it's only about self, it's only about short term, etc., the organization operates at that level and causes tremendous damage and suffering in the world. Whereas if the leader operates at a higher level of consciousness, so will the organization. And likewise, if we talk about healing, and you asked me the question earlier, what is a healing versus a conscious organization? I think you kind of answered it. It's not just about doing less harm, it's proactively healing what already exists. I'm not going to make you more sick because of my business, but actually I'm going to take what you already have and make you whole, make you healthier, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to enable you to grow from there. A leader who has not healed themselves will end up causing suffering, right, on the organization. So you have to work on yourself, right, before you can be a healing leader. You have to heal. And I learned that in the process of writing the book.
Yeah, let me read read some sentence that I read from an article. You said, unless the leader embarks on the journey from within and is open to the self-evaluation necessary, the real change can happen. Working on yourself is something you have to do if you want to become a healing organization. That's what it says.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. You have to heal yourself before you can heal others.
Yes.
In a way, you have to start. You don't get fully healed, but you have to be working on yourself. And then in the process of healing others, you will further heal yourself. And this lesson was really brought home to me when I was writing the book, and I was ready to really jump into it. And I had done the research and collected the stories. And I had set aside a few months, the whole summer and a few more months, just to focus on that. And then I was told by 3 people, including our friend Nilima, and Lynn Twist, as well as a person I worked with as a coach. They all said, if you're writing about healing, you need to work on your own healing. You should take some time off, be with yourself, go inward, go on some experiences that will deepen your own consciousness and look at what needs to be healed within you. And initially I resisted. They said, you're always running from project to project, from airport to airport. There's no real time for reflection and thinking. And so take some time off. And I said, oh, I don't have time for that. I have my deadline October 5th. I have to finish this
Yeah.
manuscript. They said, no, 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 you can delay the book. It's no big deal. So fortunately, I listened to them and I did delay the book by 5 months. And then I said yes to some experiences, including going to the Himalayas in India with the Shakti group,
Yeah.
where we went to the Ladakh region with the border with China and Tibet and India. For about 8 days, very Buddhist kind of spiritual learnings that you get there. I went on a silent retreat with a group of about 35 people from the world of business in upstate New York. I went to the Amazon in Ecuador, to the rainforest, and spent 10 days with the Pachamama Alliance, which is
Wow.
connecting, the indigenous wisdom with the Western wisdom. And we spent quite a
Did
few
you
days
feel,
with...
did you feel connect to nature?
Oh yeah, that was the whole idea, right? And we spent time with two different native indigenous people, the Achuar and the Zapara, right?
Wow.
And we lived with them. We ate the food. We went to shamanic healing. We went on hikes. We went on the boat and canoes, all kinds of things. And it was a tremendous eye-opening experience, connecting to nature first of all, and the sort of mother nature. Pachamama is the planet, right, or our ultimate mother. I even had an ayahuasca journey experience as part of that, which
Yes,
was
we
really
talked
profound.
about that.
Yeah.
It's a great experience.
Yeah, and it's something that has existed for tens of thousands of years in these cultures, and
Yes.
there's a reason why nature provides these things to
Yes.
deepen our consciousness, to allow us to see things that we would normally not see because of the way we live our lives, right? And I also worked with a coach for the first time that summer, and all of these experiences put together sort of made me focus on my own life and come to certain realizations about who I was. I came to know myself at a deeper level. I came to know myself as a child and who I was, what was my true essence, what was my real nature. And I had kind of rejected that because my father was the opposite of that, and he kept telling me, you cannot be like that, you cannot be trusting, you cannot be idealistic, you should not be peaceful, you
He,
shouldn't be all
he,
those.
he was very patriarchal, right?
Yes, extremely patriarchal. I come from a culture, my grandfather, my uncles, everybody, hyper masculine, patriarchal, feudal system, very abusive, cruel, misogynistic. The women are really treated badly. So I came from that. That was my father. But my mother was the opposite, just pure love, right? But as we all do, we tend to follow our father because he's
Yeah.
successful in the world, And he told me everything that I was a weakness, right? And so I came to reject my own qualities. I saw them as weaknesses, but they were actually my gifts, right? The trusting, the idealism, the peace-loving, harmony, nature, all of that. And so I came to know myself at a deeper level through these explorations. I also then got to a place of loving myself for who I am, right?
I think this is the first thing, to love ourselves. This is
Yeah.
not the first step.
Now, first I said is knowing yourself, and then you have to love yourself.
Yeah.
Now, for me, even to the extent I knew myself, I did not love myself because my father taught me that that is all
Okay.
a weakness. So, I almost hated those things about myself.
Okay.
Right? So then I came to a place ultimately of not only accepting, but embracing and being grateful for the qualities that I was born with. I said, wow, that is my gift. That is what I need to bring to the world. So knowing myself, loving myself, being yourself. Because once you know and love, then you can be. You can say, I need to be just who I am. I don't have to apologize for that. I should bring that to the world. And then so I developed a whole series of sort of steps in that journey, which I'm going to write about in another book later this year. Sort of a personal book as part of my own healing journey, my path to inner peace and healing and a life of purpose. And the biggest insight really, Maria, came when my coach, when she heard my life story and about my mother and father and about my work and how I changed 15 years ago and started writing about these kinds of things, about forms of endearment, conscious business, everybody matters, Shakti leadership, healing organization. she said, do you realize that you have been honoring your mother with your work for the last 15 years? That before that you spent 45 years trying to live up to your father, trying to win your father's approval, and you could never do that because
I know
he's
what you mean.
opposite. He's the opposite of you. So it doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to do that. And plus, that is not you. And then you finally realized, I didn't even consciously realize, I just knew that this felt right. I remember I had tears in my eyes as I was writing Forms of Endearment. I said, oh my God, this is what I didn't know I was looking, but this is what I was. This, we know about the hero's journey, right? In the
Yes.
Joseph Campbell, we write about it. That was kind of my time, right? That journey. And I was awakened to my own inner longing, right? That I didn't want to be part of a world of business that was based upon using people and dominating them and cruelty and dog eat dog and all that kind of metaphor of business, which was abusing and harming people just to make money. In marketing, we are selling people all kinds of stuff. We are lying to them, misleading them just to get them to do things. So that was my awakening. And then, she said, does your mother know that? And I said, well, I didn't know that. So how would my mother know that, right? So she said, I need you to call your mother and tell her this. I said, well,
Wow.
we don't talk like that. In my family, we just talk about the weather and we talk about how's your health, She said, no, I need you to call her and tell her. I said, well, my father always picks up the phone and he puts it on speaker. And if I talk to her, he will be listening the whole thing. And he'll say, why is he talking like that? What's wrong with him? He said, yeah, I don't care. And I said, well, I'm going to India in 3 weeks. I will tell her myself in person. And she said, no, your mother is 80 years old. You don't know what happens in 3 weeks. So you need to tell her. And so I did the next day. I called her the next day and fortunately my father was in the shower and I told her.
And did you have the opportunity to say to her?
I did.
Wow.
And this was the most healing conversation of my life because she had no idea. I told her, I called her Mummy, right? I said, Mummy, everything I've done in the world that has made any difference, that people have cared about, is because of what you stand for and what you taught us. For 60 years, she never raised her voice at any of us. All she did was love us unconditionally, take care of us, never asked for anything, right? Forgave us for everything. It was incredible. I mean, it's almost unreal, the extent to which she embodied those things. And I said, that is the energy that the world is missing. Your energy. The world is dying and killing each other because they're not connected to the energy that you represent. And she just started crying and she says, I am nothing. I said, no, you are everything.
Yes, she was.
But she thought that because, she was not that educated, she only went up to the 8th grade. She didn't really speak English very well. My father was a PhD and gold medal winning scientist. So she always thought that she was much less than, she wasn't worthy.
Yes, he lived in the United States.
In Africa and West India, in Barbados, we all lived, But she always had this image of herself. I said, no, you're everything. Right? And that's what, some people say, I am everything. And actually they are nothing. Right? And other people say, I am nothing. And actually they are everything. That's what I realized. And so it was healing for her. It was healing for me. And for her, because she died less than 1 year after that, right? She died last year. And I'm so grateful that I was able to tell her that. I was able to record the conversation. I have it forever on my phone. And she got a satisfaction because she always thought, oh, my life, I didn't do anything. That all I did was take care of the family and nothing in the world. And I told her, because of you, we are making a difference in the world now. And we really are. I mean, conscious capitalism, Shakti leadership, all of these things are truly making a difference. I think we can take great satisfaction in that, that it has taken us 12 years since we started conscious capitalism, but now I see the tipping point is arriving. So that was part of my healing last 2 years ago, 2018, as I was writing this book. And I think that every leader needs to go through that journey, some version of that journey, which is why I'm writing this next book about my path to healing. I think, they can go through it their own way. They will have to figure out how to know who they are themselves. They will have to figure out how to love themselves, etc. And then from that place of healing, they can then bring that into their organization, into their leadership.
For sure. Raj, there are many wonderful leaders who are watching this webinar. So tell us, what happens when your head meets your heart? So how can
I think that is the combination, as we talk about in Shakti leadership, right? It's not about replacing masculine with feminine.
Yeah.
It's about integrating and becoming whole, right? Because we need love, but we also need strength and courage, right?
Yeah.
We need left brain and right brain. We need head and heart, right? We need elder energy and child energy. We need all of this to come together. So as Martin Luther King said, we have to be tough-minded and tender-hearted at the same time. Because if you are tough without love, that is tyranny. You can be a tyrant. And if you're love without being strong, then you can be ineffective. So I think the bringing together of those two things is what's most important, because then we can actually achieve massive things. The leaders who have changed the world for the better are people who have combined head and heart, whether it's Lincoln or Gandhi or Mandela or King or many other leaders, right? They have combined strength with love. And that's the combination. I think we have to strive for that. I think we can develop ourselves that way. One of the metaphors I love that Nilima has used, and she and I may write a book about that, it's called The Wise Fool of Tough Love, if you remember that, right?
I'd love if you talk about it.
Yeah, so the wise fool of tough love is kind of reflecting the four energies that we have within us, right? Or we have access to. So there's the elder energy, which is our higher self, our divine self, our parent self, which is about wisdom, meaning, purpose, legacy. It transcends our own lifetime. It's about sort of a spiritual dimension. That's the wisdom. Then there's the child within us. We all have an inner child, right? And the inner child is about maybe 7 years old. They still have their innocence. They still have their joy, the curiosity, the creativity, the fun, the humor, all of that. But for many people, that gets extinguished, or there's some trauma. All of us have trauma in our lives. As young children, we all experience, and even through life, we experience trauma. And so there's a wounded inner child. And we have to figure out how to make that child healthy. And I think in Shakti leadership, we have some processes for that, right? To sort of nurture our own inner child, right? And comfort that child and heal those traumas that they may have experienced, so that we then have access to the healthy child energy. So that's the wise and the foolish, right? So we need to be wise and foolish. Have the wisdom and the foolishness or the joy, because without that, there's no innovation and there's no creativity if we are not connected to that child energy. And then we, of course, need to have toughness and love, which is sort of the mature masculine energy and the mature feminine energy, right? So that combination, the wise fool of tough love, is what we have to get towards, which means we need to cultivate the positive aspects of each of those, because for each of them, there's a negative too. If you have elder energy, the positive aspect is the wise elder. The negative aspect is the dogmatic, sort of close-minded, superstitious, type of leader who basically says you have to believe what I believe, or like religious fundamentalism is an example of the negative elder energy. So we have to stay away from dogma and superstition, but be connected to wisdom and meaning. With the child, you can have the innocence and the joy, or you can have sort of self-centered, adolescent, short-term, myopic, like a child with a tantrum, right? So there's the negative child energy as well, which is immature. It is childish. It's not childlike, but it's childish energy, right? So we have to stay away from that and be on the positive side. Likewise, in the masculine energy, we have to be with the strength, courage, resilience, focus, and not with the domination, aggression, hyper competition, winning at all costs energy. And with the feminine, we have to be with compassion, empathy, inclusiveness, love, forgiveness, vulnerability, but not with neediness or dependence or sentimentality, etc. Right? All of that. So we stay in the upper levels of all of those and integrate all those together. We cultivate that which is less developed within us. Once we have the awareness that my tendency is always to come from love and wisdom, therefore I need to strengthen my tough and child energy. And how do I do that? Once I become conscious, I can cultivate that. And then when you develop that wholeness, then you have to have the discernment to know what is needed in a given
Yes,
situation,
compass,
right? And I think
yes.
that's where the presence practice helps, because you can sense, oh, if I show up with toughness in this situation, that will make it worse. I need to show up with some humor,
Yes.
or I need to show up with just love and forgiveness, or whatever, as a parent or as a leader, right? And then we have the flexibility, right? So again, this goes back to the Shakti leadership model, right? So presence, access to all of that personal power, Shakti, and then flexibility, right? Wholeness, and then flexibility, and then congruence, staying aligned with our purpose. So that idea, I think, is very important. And, the great leaders have that. They are
Yeah.
wise fools of tough love. They are very wise. Dalai Lama is extremely wise, but also very playful and always giggling. Desmond Tutu, right? Gandhi was like that. Many
Yes.
leaders are like that.
Good examples,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Raj, we don't have much time. Our time is over.
Mm.
So, and I know we don't have time anymore. So I'd like to thank you so much for your time, right? Thank you for joining us and share all this information or all your wisdom. So thank you so much. So
Thank you, Maria, for
here,
hosting me. Yes.
yes, thank you so much for all of
And
you.
I don't know if the healing organization was supposed to come out in Portuguese around this time. I don't know if it ever got done yet, because I was supposed to
Yes,
come for that.
yeah,
Right?
but I don't know, but
Everything is delayed
maybe,
probably.
yes,
But it will
yes,
be out. If not already, it will be out within months. So I encourage people that if they want the Portuguese edition, it will be out. Otherwise, the English edition, of course, is out. So,
yes, it's important
yeah.
to tell them, everybody knows about that. So thank you, everybody, to stay with us until now. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you all. Raj, can you stay with us?
Yes, yes.
Um,